something felt different this time. Not because the palace doors suddenly opened. Not because a doctor stood before cameras with a grim announcement. And not because Buckingham Palace used the kind of words that make the whole country stop breathing. It was quieter than that. A king who spent his life being trained never to show weakness was suddenly being watched in a way no monarch can fully control. Every public appearance, every careful smile, every slower step, every moment Queen Camilla looked just a little too closely at him. And somewhere behind the gold carriages, the uniforms and the polite royal statements, one question began to grow louder. How serious is this really? King Charles has been living with an unspecified form of cancer since the palace confirmed the diagnosis in February 2024, after doctors discovered a separate concern during treatment for an enlarged prostate. The palace also made clear it was not prostate cancer, but the exact type has never been publicly revealed. BBC. That silence created the first mystery. Because in royal life, what is not said often becomes just as powerful as what is said. At first the message was controlled. The king was positive, treatment had begun, public duties would be adjusted, the monarchy would continue, the machine would keep moving. And for a while that seemed to work. Charles returned to public life. He smiled through engagements. He shook hands. He stood beside Camilla. He appeared determined to prove that the crown was not slipping, even while his body was quietly fighting something the public had not been allowed to name. But then came the part that made people look twice. The treatment did not simply disappear. It continued. Palace sources later said his treatment was moving in a positive direction and would continue as a managed condition. Reuters via GMA News. Those words were meant to reassure people. Positive direction. Managed condition. Carefully monitored. But to many watching from the outside, they also carried a heavier meaning. This was not a short chapter. This was not a neat recovery story wrapped in a single royal statement. This was something the king had to live with, schedule around, and carry into the most visible role in Britain. And that is where the emotional weight begins. Because Charles is not just a patient, he is a father, a husband, a monarch, a man who waited longer than anyone in British history to become king, only to face cancer early in his reign. For Prince William, the pressure is impossible to miss. He is no longer just preparing for the future in theory. He is watching the future move closer every time his father's health becomes part of the national conversation. Behind every public smile is the uncomfortable truth that William's role is changing faster than he may have wanted. And then there is Harry. The son who left, the son who spoke, the son whose relationship with the royal family became one of the most painful public fractures in modern royal history. Reports have said Harry has hoped for reconciliation with his father, while Charles continues treatment, even as security disputes and family tensions remain unresolved. Reuters. That is the part that makes this story feel less like royal news, and more like a family tragedy playing out under chandeliers. Because illness changes the meaning of time. A phone call left unanswered feels different. A visit delayed feels different. An argument that once seemed permanent suddenly begins to look dangerous. And this is where the story turns. In late 2025, Charles shared what sounded like good news. His treatment schedule could be reduced in 2026 after early diagnosis, effective intervention and following doctor's orders. News. For a moment the country exhaled. Reduced treatment sounded like relief. It sounded like a door opening. It sounded like the worst fears might have been stronger than the reality. But then came the detail people could not ignore. Reduced did not mean over. It did not mean cured. It did not mean the palace was ready to close the chapter. The king was still being monitored, still living with the consequences of the diagnosis, still balancing duty with a private battle most people will never fully see. And that is what makes this so devastating. Not one dramatic collapse. Not one public breakdown. But the slow realization that even a crown cannot protect a man from the most human fear of all. For William, it means watching his father fight while carrying the shadow of succession on his shoulders. For Harry, it means every day of distance costs more than pride ever promised. And for Charles, it means trying to remain steady for a nation, while his family's deepest wounds remain exposed. So when people say William and Harry are emotional, it is not hard to understand why. Because this is no longer only about palace strategy, titles, or old interviews. It is about two sons facing the possibility that time may be the one thing even royalty cannot negotiate with. And maybe the most painful question is not what the palace will say next. Maybe it is this. If King Charles' illness becomes the moment that finally forces his family to face each other, will it heal them in time, or will it reveal that some distances were allowed to grow too wide?